Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to try to unpack the life of Lee Harvey Oswald,
Okay,
the man who assassinated John F. Kennedy.
right.
We're going to be using Case Closed as our main source here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really interesting book. It kind of takes aim at some of the more popular conspiracy theories
Interesting.
and really tries to understand the man behind the rifle.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing too. You always have to balance curiosity with skepticism
Right.
when it comes to these kind of really, really world-changing events.
Yeah, especially something like this where, there's so many different theories out there.
Right.
So just starting at the beginning here, I mean, this isn't just the story of some guy who snaps one day.
Right.
This guy had kind of a wild life,
Right.
going all the way back to his childhood. He defected to the Soviet Union at one point.
Wow.
And even before the assassination of Kennedy, he attempted another assassination.
Oh, really?
So this is going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the book starts off talking about Oswald's childhood.
Okay.
And this isn't just he moved around a lot. He never really felt like he belonged anywhere.
Oh, okay.
It was city to city, school to school, always living with different relatives.
Mm-hmm.
Never really formed those deep bonds.
Uh-huh.
And you can kind of see that in some of these anecdotes about his childhood. They talk about how one of his schoolmates, Philip Vinson, remembers him leading gangs of kids, but never actually having any of those kids over to his house.
Wow. So there's this almost a longing for connection, but almost an inability to actually form that genuine relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then on top of that, you've got neighbors who remember him.
Right?
Guys like Hiram Conway, who he said that Oswald had kind of a vicious streak. Throwing rocks at kids, quick to anger.
Interesting.
And then when he was a teenager, he had to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. And that kind of revealed that he had a lot of deep-seated anxieties. He was very shy. But then also, he had this kind of vivid fantasy life.
Oh, wow.
That really revolved around power.
Yeah, that's a key insight, I think. Almost like he's trying to compensate for the lack of control he had in his own life.
Yeah.
With these fantasies.
Exactly.
Of being, all-powerful.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then you add in his relationship with his mother, Marguerite.
Right.
And it sounds like she might have been as troubled as he was.
Oh, really?
And, they say that she potentially neglected his need for, proper psychological treatment.
It just makes you wonder, what might have been different if he had gotten the support he needed.
Yeah, what could have been.
Right.
So you've got this kind of, troubled childhood.
Yeah.
These underlying psychological issues.
Right.
And then as he gets older, he starts to become very disillusioned with America.
Okay.
And starts to lean into Marxism. And this is where it starts to get really wild. While he was serving in the Marines, he was actually taking concrete steps towards defecting to the Soviet Union.
Oh, wow.
He started studying Russian. He even applied to a Swiss school as a cover to get a passport.
Really? So this was planned?
This was not some whim.
Wow.
And so he actually does end up defecting to the Soviet Union.
No.
And it's interesting, the book quotes a KGB officer.
Okay.
Yuri Nosenko.
Uh-huh.
And he describes Oswald's life in Minsk as just not that glamorous. He was under constant surveillance. He wasn't really trusted.
Wow.
And they actually ended up refusing to grant him citizenship.
Oh, really?
And they tie that back to this period of warming relations between the U.S. and the USSR.
Oh, okay.
They call it the spirit of Camp David.
Gotcha.
So giving citizenship to a defecting American soldier would have been a major diplomatic headache.
Yeah, makes sense.
So he ends up in this kind of weird limbo where he's disillusioned with America.
Yeah.
And he's also disillusioned with the Soviet system.
Right.
Never really felt like he belonged anywhere.
Right.
And just kind of yearning for a purpose.
Yeah, this is a really crucial period in his life because it feels like it really laid the groundwork for what happens next.
Yeah, this is where it all kind of starts to come together.
Uh-huh.
This anger, this disillusionment, this yearning for purpose.
Right.
And that's what we'll pick up next time. We'll talk about his return to the U.S.
Okay.
And his deepening involvement with pro-Castro groups.
Interesting.
And an incident that I think really foreshadows the darkness to come.
Can't wait. When we left off, Oswald was back in the U.S.
Right.
and still seemingly searching for where he belonged in the world.
You'd think returning home would bring some stability.
Right.
But it seems like it just continued the chaos for him.
Right.
Bouncing around from job to job, having financial troubles. His relationship with his family was still strained. Right. Really seems like the guy could never find a place where he was comfortable.
The book talks about how he was interacting with the Russian emigre community in Texas.
Okay.
They tolerated him mostly because they felt sorry for Marina.
Right.
But even within this community, he seemed to stand out.
Okay.
One of the guys in that community, George Boo, noticed Oswald's really strong desire for power.
Interesting.
Almost like that vivid fantasy life we were talking about before.
Right.
Was starting to become his reality.
It's around this time that his pro-Castro leanings really become much more prominent.
Yeah, he got involved with groups like the Fair Play for Cuba Committee.
Right.
But he wasn't just a passive supporter.
Yeah.
He took it upon himself to set up a New Orleans chapter all by himself.
Wow.
Seems like he was really determined to be noticed to make a difference. And he even gets into this very public argument with Carlos Brignier.
Wait, who is Brignier? Should we back up and explain that?
Sure. Carlos Brignier was a Cuban exile.
Okay.
Who was very, very against Castro's regime.
Okay.
And he and Oswald had this very public, heated exchange that spilled out onto the streets in New Orleans.
Wow.
And you can really see how passionate Oswald had become about his political beliefs at this point.
It almost seems like a dress rehearsal for what's to come.
Yeah.
Case Closed reveals that just a few months before this incident with Brignier, Oswald actually tried to kill General Edwin Walker.
Oh, wow.
This is where things really change.
Yeah.
We're not talking about political ideas anymore. This is a real act of violence.
Right.
The book goes into a lot of detail about how he bought a Carcano rifle under an alias.
Okay.
How he staked out Walker's house, even practiced shooting.
Wow.
He even dug a shallow grave near Walker's house.
Jeez.
Pretty chilling stuff.
Luckily, his shot missed, hit the window frame, spared Walker's life.
I can't imagine what was going through Marina's mind when she found out about all this.
Right.
The book talks about how horrified she was.
But also, she was afraid to go to the police.
Yeah.
Really puts into perspective the position she was in.
Right.
Parried to this guy who was becoming more and more dangerous.
So now we're in the fall of 1963.
Okay.
Oswald is back in Dallas. He's working at the Texas School Book Depository.
Right.
Just weeks before Kennedy is scheduled to visit the city.
This is where the book really breaks down the timeline of events.
Okay.
Leading up to the assassination.
Okay.
It covers everything. Oswald's weekend stays with Ruth Payne, his renewed contact with the FBI, and even this mysterious note that he left for Agent Hosty.
Right. That note has been the source of a lot of speculation.
Oh, yeah.
For conspiracy theorists, they see it as like a cover-up.
Right.
But Case Closed takes a different view.
Okay.
It says that, destroying the note was a mistake, but it was more likely just bureaucratic incompetence rather than a deliberate attempt to hide something. The FBI was under a lot of pressure to make it seem like they hadn't missed any warning signs.
Right.
So then, of course, you have the events of November 22nd.
Right.
Allegedly, Oswald brought a package to work. Witnesses place him on the 6th floor of the depository.
Right.
A rifle's discovered. Then Officer J.D. Tippit is shot shortly after the assassination.
Right. Each of those events has been analyzed so many times.
Right.
But Case Closed really digs in.
Okay.
Examines all the witness testimony, the forensic evidence, the ballistics reports. Really tries to put together a complete story of what might have actually happened.
And it doesn't shy away from any of the conspiracy theories.
No, it tackles them head on.
Okay.
The single bullet theory, the magic bullet argument, claims that there were multiple shooters.
Right.
It really breaks down the evidence and offers counter-arguments.
Okay.
Based on, a careful analysis of the facts.
Right. So it's not just dismissing them.
Right.
It's encouraging readers to look at the evidence themselves.
Exactly.
Think critically, question everything.
And it doesn't just focus on, the fringe theories either.
Okay.
It spends a lot of time on Jim Garrison's investigation and the trial of Clay Shaw, talking about how the evidence was flawed, questionable witness testimony, and ultimately the case failed.
What's the book's overall conclusion?
So after looking at all this, it really makes you think, was Oswald really acting alone?
Right.
Just motivated by his own, messed up ideology?
Yeah.
Or was there something more there?
Right. Yeah.
Some hidden force that pushed him to kill Kennedy?
That's the question that I was left with after reading Case Closed.
Right.
It lays out a very, very compelling argument for Oswald's guilt.
Right.
But it also recognizes why people are drawn to these conspiracy theories.
Right. We have to find some deeper meaning in these really senseless events.
It's like we're wired to look for a more complex answer.
Right.
A lone gunman driven by his own demons.
It doesn't feel big enough for something that changed the world.
It's almost easier to believe that there were these shadowy figures pulling the strings,
right,
than to accept that maybe sometimes things just happen randomly.
So what are we left with?
I think what the book reminds us is that history is rarely simple.
Right.
Even with all the evidence in the world,
Yeah.
there are always going to be gaps and unanswered questions.
And those gaps are what keep people speculating.
Exactly. They fuel the debate even decades later.
It's humbling to think about.
Yeah.
We try to understand the past.
Right.
Figure out why people did what they did.
But some mysteries might just never be solved.
And maybe that's okay.
Right.
Maybe the search itself is what matters.
Yeah, the process of questioning and looking at the evidence is just as important as finding the answer.
This has been quite the deep dive.
Yeah, a lot to consider.
We've really gotten into the weeds of Oswald's life, looked at all the evidence surrounding the assassination.
And I think we have a better understanding of why these conspiracy theories are still so strong.
I think one of the biggest takeaways from Case Closed is that it encourages you to think critically, question your assumptions, and look at the evidence for yourself.
Absolutely.
If you want to really understand this moment in history and wrestle with all these questions about truth and evidence and our need to find meaning in tragedy, this book is a must-read.
Couldn't agree more.
Case Closed is dense.
Yeah.
Lots of detail, lots of interesting arguments.
If you're ready for your own deep dive, check it out. You'll find a link in the description.
Okay.
This has been a fascinating conversation.
I agree.
Thank you to everyone for listening to another deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep those minds curious.